계신 우리 참석자 여러분들 입장하셔서 착석해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 국제 정세도 알아봤고요. 해운 항만 경제의 방향성 살펴보고 있습니다. 금융 세션에 이어서 해운 항만 세션 두 번째 세션을 이어가도록 하겠습니다. 서로의 경험과 또 지혜를 공유함으로써 앞서서도 위기 상황, 도전 말씀을 많이 주셨는데요. 다가오는 도전에 앞서서 대응할 수 있는 역량을 함께 키워나가고 있습니다. 함께 해주셔서 감사하고요. 사실 이렇게 두 번째 세션까지 오면은 우리 참가자분들께서 좀 이석하시는 경우가 많은데 오늘 정말 뒷좌석에 제일 뒤에 테이블에 착석하신 분들도 이동하지 않으시고 끝까지 함께 해주시는 모습이 너무나도 감동적입니다. 감사합니다. 이제 마지막 해운 항만 두 번째 세션 안내해드리도록 하겠습니다. 국제 리서치 전문기관인 컨테이너선 시장 동향 및 전망을 주제로 말씀 주시겠습니다. 알파라이너의 수석 애널리스트 얀 타이드만 님께서 준비를 해주셨습니다. 여러분의 따뜻한 박수로 맞아주시면 감사하겠습니다. 네, 역시 작년에 이어서 올해도 Kobc 마리타임 컨퍼런스에 함께 해주셨습니다. 국제 리서치 전문기관 알파라이너의 수석 애널리스트 얀 타이드만 님께서 이번에는 컨테이너선의 시장 동향과 전망에 대해서 말씀을 주시겠습니다. 다시 한번 큰 박수로 함께 맞아주시면 감사하겠습니다.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me just say it's a pleasure to be back. Thank you very much for inviting me. I had the pleasure to be here already 3 times in the last few years, and I enjoyed it tremendously every time. So I'm back here once again to give you a little overview of the container market, where we are right now, and a short outlook on where we see the market going. But I remember when I was here almost exactly 1 year ago, some of you pressured me, be a little bit more precise. Where are we going to go next year? And then, if you remember all the events that happened almost right after the Kobc conference, the struggle between Israel and Gaza, the Suez Canal, the Cape diversions. So the market has been very difficult to predict. I'll try nevertheless to take our data to see what we know is happening and then come up with a few assumptions of where we see container shipping going. And I would like to start very, very briefly with a short introduction of our company, who we are and what we do, but don't worry, it's not going to be an advertising, just so that you know me and what we're doing. And to clarify one big mystery, because my official title is I work for Axis Marine, and many in the liner shipping industry have rarely heard of it. And when I say Alphaliner, they say, oh yeah, I know Alphaliner. That's you and this guy, we like it, we use it. And we're one of the cases where I believe our product for liner shipping, at least for the people in container shipping, is a little bit more famous than the company. So Axis Marine, that's me and my dear colleagues who are here today also. We're a data intelligence provider. We run a platform which you might know. We also offer a weekly newsletter which many of you hopefully might read. And we cover tanker, dryable commodities, but I'm only here for the container. We're about 230 dedicated professionals around the globe with offices in Paris, London, Hamburg, Singapore, Athens, Houston, Dubai, and Sofia. So that's the advertising almost out of the way. We run our platform. If you log into that, that is your starting point to everything container shipping, so basically your main information screen. I would like to start with a few very, very basic market numbers, some history, how we got there, and then outline the current challenges that you see. And if we look at the container fleet today, here are some of the numbers. What are we talking about? We're talking about roughly 7,000 ships, give or take. We are talking about a fleet that is over 30 million TEU in capacity, and it has grown 10%, almost 11% compared to a year ago. And you can see I've given you the numbers for 2 years ago and 4 years ago in the respective months so that you can have an orientation of where that's going. Currently, we have an order book in the container ship of 7.5 million TEU, roughly. It's actually going to be a little bit bigger because these are figures from September, and a lot of ships have been ordered recently. But a quarter of the fleet. and the vessel age is about 13, 14 years. If you consider that a container ship, as we heard earlier, or any ship typically lives to be 25 years old, is that old? Yes or no? It's pretty much where you would expect it to be. It's a pretty average. However, if you weigh it by container intake, larger ships tend to be newer. The weighted age is about 11 years. What are these numbers? Are they high or are they low? Just for context, the fleet we have is the biggest in history ever. The capacity and the count of ships. The year-on-year growth is among the strongest we have seen. Vessel unemployment, on the other hand, is low. It's under 1%. It almost doesn't exist. It's very low. And the order book capacity, it is the biggest in history. Not in relation to the fleet, but in absolute terms, we have the biggest vessel order book ever. And that is a challenge maybe, and we'll come to that. Average age, it's normal, but it's starting to get high in some areas. We'll have a look at this a little bit later. And otherwise, if we take in the weighing, include age into that picture, then we're still in the normal category. As you may know, and probably you know, the container liner market is strongly consolidated. Currently, the top 10 carriers control 84% of the fleet capacity. That's quite a lot. It's almost half for the top 3 only. And these numbers over the years have only been increasing. However, the top 10 market share, the consolidation, has kind of reduced recently, and the reason for that is that it's the carriers outside of the top 10, the big regionals, which are growing quite strongly. So how did we get to these numbers? You may see that over a period of 20 years, 25 years, if you extend that line to the year 2000, the fleet has grown almost in a linear way. And it has grown by about 1 million TEU every year. And that's quite surprising if you think of all the things that happened in that period, including a complete market crash, and including the Suez Canal crisis, or the Cape diversions, everything we have right now. You see there's almost no bumps. That growth has been linear. And for so many years, the question is that everybody's asking, when will it end? Will the fleet grow forever, or will we at one point, will it be over, and will the market reach a mature level and a saturation? It has to go down at some point. And what we actually did see, no, it didn't go down. On the contrary, in the last year, you can see that the growth of the fleet has even accelerated. That's the first time in 20 years that you can see a kink in that line, and we can see a stronger fleet growth than ever. How have the carrier performed financially? That's the carrier core margins, so that's the margins the carriers make only on income from liner shipping and closely associated activities. And you can see that for the better part of a decade, carriers have been underperforming, had some good years, had some bad years, but you can see on average, nothing much in terms of money has been made for a very, very long period in liner shipping. And then came the post-COVID boom, where the carriers all earned millions and millions, or it's correct to say billions and billions of money. And that was entirely driven by a capacity shortage, not because there was a cargo boom, that was also the case, but because many ships were caught up in delays, in port congestion. It was the network inefficiency that has gone down. We have then come back to a new normal post-corona. We can see that we are basically ready to continue the line that we had for a decade before. But now you can see for the last 2 quarters, and the next quarterly results are out, and they will be probably in the same range. The carriers are once again making very, very good margins, and that's purely based on the effects of the Red Sea crisis and the Suez diversion, which the carriers have to take, and which is an artificial lid which is being placed on capacity, because the ships you take on that longer route, they are kind of missing somewhere else. So if you remember one thing, I'm sure you cannot remember or memorize all these numbers. The number 25 is an easy thing to remember. In the 25 years since 2000, the fleet has grown by about 25 million TEU. 25 years is the lifetime of a container ship, and we are moving towards a world where there's 25 relevant carriers left. You might make a discussion, it's only 24, it's 26, but roughly 25, which are divided into the top 10 global players, which are the ones which are present in every market, more or less. Actually, there's only 9, and number 10 is also already absent in some markets. And then we have 10 big regional carriers, especially which are growing within the intra-Asia market, which are venturing out on longer routes from China to India, which have also ventured into bigger tonnage of ships of 7,000, 8,000 TEU, with ships of 14,000 TEU on order. So we have these 10 big regionals, which are really relevant. And then we have 5 carriers, which I would say are specialists because they are catering to some very small niche, which might be, for example, a Jones Act carrier in the United States between the mainland US and Hawaii, or it might be an intra-Indonesia specialist, which has a huge fleet. But if you take these 25 carriers, it's probably safe to say that between them, they control 99% or 98% of the relevant fleet. So it's these ones you have to watch. So what are the challenges on a global scale that liner shipping is facing? Well, I'm not telling you anything new. You all know this, but I wanted to bring it into one chart. Corona is still on there, but with a question mark, because I hope we have Corona behind us now. But diseases can come, lockdowns can come at any time. We learned that. We learned how strict the policies in some countries were to shut down ports. Don't believe that's going to happen anytime soon, but it's on the radar and people know it can happen. We have war in Europe between Russia and Ukraine, but also now in the Middle East. We have the associated closures of the Suez Canal. Well, it is not officially closed, but the Red Sea is closed, and many of the mainland shipping companies are no longer using it. We have attacks on vessels. We have all kinds of challenges. We have equipment shortages, port delays. I don't have to read them to you all. Lack of rainfall was already mentioned earlier, I think, when we talked about the tanker and dry bulk markets, so I don't have to repeat that. Climate change. So you might worry, or you might wonder, climate change, how does that affect shipping? It's not that there's more storms on the ocean and the ships have a problem with that. Climate change, that's usually problems in the hinterland. For example, when rain falls, makes rivers no longer navigable for containers on barges, which then feed to main ports. Or in summer, for example, the opposite, when the draft in rivers goes too low and containers cannot be carried to the mainline ships. For example, if you think of ports like Rotterdam, which is on the Rhine River, which is, again, very much depending on snowfall in the Alps to carry enough water, and so on and so on. The long story short is, you know about all this, but we don't know what's going to be next, which of these problems will arise. We just had the specter of strikes on the US East Coast, which then only lasted for a very short time, so it didn't create too much of a problem, but it already created quite a backlog and a delay of ships in ports, which took a few weeks to clear up. So imagine if that had taken like a month or longer, then that would have turned into a major problem. The main theme here is none of these single problems hurts container shipping. It is the combination of many problems here and there, depending on the region you're active in, and it also depends on the uncertainty, because you don't know what's next. If you have a challenging situation next year, but you know what the challenge is, you can deal with that and you can work towards that, and you can have a plan B and you can try to mitigate. But right now we're in a situation where we don't really know exactly what is going to happen and when. So in the business world, your strategy will be to come to a degree as much as you can prepared for everything, which is of course easier said than done. So the outlook for the next year and beyond, like I said, it's difficult to say what's going to happen. So this is a bit what if. I'm just looking at some phenomena and how they affect shipping. We all know ships are going from the Suez Canal to the Cape, but how much does that have an effect on capacity? We have the new alliances, but what will that bring? So I'm trying to go through that just to give you a few base numbers. So as you can see on this graphic, we are comparing ships only on trades which normally go through the Suez, so trades which do not go through the Suez, for example, Asia, South America, are not included here. It's only ships which normally would go through the Suez Canal, and to see how many of them are rerouted and how many of them are still going through the original route. And if you do a calculation, you come to the fact, and you look at liner schedules, that most of these services concerned nowadays, they take 2 weeks longer than they used to take when the ships were still going through the canal. So that means you need 2 ships more. If you do a calculation, how much more is that percentage-wise? We end up in 16% of additional tonnage demand on Far East Europe routes. At least, probably it's a bit more, we're conservative here. And the same 16% more on Far East US East Coast routes, which are routed, some of them are routed through the Panama Canal, not affected, but those which are routed via Suez are affected. Now, of course, not all services take these routes, but if you see how many services do and you figure this in, currently it's a minimum of 4 to 5% global induced tonnage demand from the reroutings. Probably if you figure in a few delays which happen here and there, it's even a little bit more, maybe more in the ballpark of 5 to 7%. Then let's see what vessel speeds are doing. Over here, we can see, irrespective of vessel diversions, just ships going on their normal route, whichever that is, reducing the speed on average very, very marginally. And we can see here the speed profiles logged over the years for the main trades. The average speeds on the sea leg have gone down, well, at the peak of 17.5 knots to under 15 knots, about 50 knots, which doesn't seem a lot. It's basically the difference of my leisurely walking speed. So if the ship sails past you, you wouldn't almost see it. However, that alone creates on these various trains a tonnage demand of 11% per week. It's 1 extra week per round voyage. And the same is true on the Far East US West Coast Trans-Pacific trade. It's another 16%. You can now see that more recently speeds have picked up again. So why is that? Are carriers going faster now? Question mark. Well, the explanation for that is that mainly services which are rerouting via the Cape of Good Hope are saving a lot of money from the Suez Canal fees that they do not have to pay. And some of that money is invested into speed, so the ships go a little bit faster around the Cape than they would have gone via Suez. Of course, they still take a lot longer, but at the same speed, it would be about 18 days of additional steaming, and the carriers are bringing it down to 14 days, also to stay in the weekly rhythm of liner shipping. So from here, at the extreme, that's another 5 to 6% of capacity through increased slow steaming. And then how many ships are trading on the ocean and how many are just waiting to get into a port? We are following that very closely. And if you see here, in the long-term trend, you can see that compared to the years before 2021, about 1 million extra TEU on average is caught up in ports. And that summarizes all kinds of effects. In there can be strikes, in there can be weather delays, in there can be congestion. It's about 1 million TEU which is absorbed. This is the same graphic, just looking at the last few months. You can see that this year has not a clear trend. It's just going on the same way it has done before, but it has increased by a lot in 2021, and that effect is still not gone. It's still doing the same. Now, one of the things you need to know about, and I'm sure you're aware of, is that carriers are operating in alliances, and 2025 will see the biggest shake-up of alliance setups in history. So what's going to happen? First off, these are the current carrier alliances. You all know them. There's the 2M of Maersk and MSC, there's the Ocean Alliance, and there's the Alliance. And these are the capacities deployed by these relevant alliances. Important, this is not the capacities added together of the shipping lines. the shipping lines are much bigger. MSC alone is 6 million TEU. So when I say what is the size of the alliance, that's only the ships which are contributed by these carriers to these alliances. And the calculation looks like this. You can see, for example, that MSC has a 6 million TEU fleet, but only 1.6 million TEU of that are contributed to the alliance. And you can see that some of the bigger carriers have a relatively low footprint in the alliance, like MSC and Maersk, where the majority of ships are still sailing outside the alliances. And you can see that for others it's about 50-50, and you can see that other mainline carriers, like especially Evergreen, HMM, and Yang, they are very, very deeply involved in the alliances. They have the majority of their fleet operating under the alliances. That means the alliances are not as big as you would initially think from their relevant partners. So what's going to happen next year? Hapag-Lloyd will leave the alliance. MSC has decided to go standalone. Ocean will continue as planned, and the rest of the alliance will continue to operate under a new name, Premier Alliances. And these will be the respective sizes of the new alliances, on the assumption that the carriers will continue to contribute the same number of ships to the new alliances that they do to the current alliances. MSC is the question mark here. They will operate as a standalone carrier, so it's not really clear what you can say their contribution to an alliance is. It's safe to say that with a 6 million TEU fleet, they will run a number of ships on the competing services that allows them to have roughly the size, at least of one of the smaller alliances. If I would have to guess, I would say they will put just under 3 million TEU in their alliance equivalent network. Another thing that was recently announced and that we rightfully predicted is that there will be a new development, namely that MSC will start a vessel sharing agreement with ONE, Yang, and HMM, limited to a number of trades to increase and broaden their network range, which will mainly help Premier Alliance to offer a coverage of network which is similar to what they could offer under the alliance. Important to know that there is not only a shake-up of alliances because they are changing, there's also one other thing happening, and that is that Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd are not only starting a new alliance, they are also trying to start an alliance of a new kind. So they are going to operate different from the existing alliances. They have decided to very much cut their services back, really limit the number of port calls, and install a huge number of shuttles and feeders which feed to these shortened mainline services. And I can tell you, whenever I talk to cargo owners or ship owners, depending on who I talk to, some say that's brilliant, it's a new way of doing it. When I talk to cargo owners, for example, or shippers, they don't like it. And it has taken some bold steps to set up this new system, especially because we do not know how the market will receive it. The bold steps are meaning that countries, entire countries, which are at the far end, are being cut off from many mainline loops, including Korea, for example, over here, but also the French North Sea ports will be cut off. Denmark, the home of Maersk, will be cut off. Well, they tell us they will serve these countries via the feeders, aka shuttles. But whether the market will like that and whether that will be successful, there's a question mark. And we also know that MSC, which is a carrier which traditionally is very fast at reacting, will probably do a counterattack on this. I'm pretty sure that MSC's upcoming network will be an anti-Gemini alliance setup where they put a great focus on many, many direct port pairs. So I'm running out of time, so I'll hurry up a bit. Order book to fleet ratio. I said we have the largest order book in the world, and that's true. It's the largest it's ever been. On that graphic, it doesn't show really. It's jumped up right now. And you can see that we are we have recently been at 30% order book to fleet. You can see that the order book is very strongly in favor of large vessels, but for the first time now, also the mid-sizes, 7,500 TEU and up, are finally being replenished, because originally most of the orders were on the large ships. So where are ships being built, container ships, over the past 15 years? You can see that Korea in blue has been one of the strongest players, but you can also see that China has aggressively come into the marketplace, and that nowadays it's almost exclusively China in red and Korea, with a tiny little bit of Japan in between, and that all other players which were active in the container ship sector, like the Philippines were, Taiwan was, Turkey was, they are kind of pushed out by now. So broken down by carriers very quickly, who's ordering where? MSC pretty much split between China and Korea. Maersk had a focus on Korea traditionally, but will also go to China for a lot of the new buildings that Maersk will not directly own but charter. CMA CGM had strong ties already to Chinese yards for a very long time, has a diverse order book between China and Korea, but increasingly now in China. COSCO, surprisingly, you can see that over time, COSCO has pushed very strongly to have ships built at its own yards, not only in China, but at NAX and DAX and at Yangzhou, where the company has stakes in. Hapag-Lloyd, traditionally a very loyal client in Korea. I have the pleasure next week to be at the christening of the Hamburg Express, built here in South Korea. But also with new orders, we know that Hapag-Lloyd is in advanced negotiations, and we expect that these orders will go to New Times Shipyard in China and Yangjian. ONE has a low exposure to Korea as a Japanese-controlled carrier, no wonder. The order book has mostly been in Japan, but recently also in China. Evergreen has a very varied approach. They're doing a bit of everything. HMM, unsurprisingly, only focuses more recently to Korea. And ZIM, well, Korea and China. And Yangming used to be a supporter, obviously, of Taiwan, but currently does not have a big order book at all. What propulsion systems are being chosen? I'm not going into detail here because the time is running out, but you can see new fuels, LNG and methanol, are coming in, but the majority so far was still conventional tonnage, despite all the talk about green tonnage. We can see that the picture is also very, very different depending on carrier. The carrier's fleets still only show gray, conventionally operated fleets, but show a very small percentage only of LNG and methanol. However, that's going to change if we are looking at recent deliveries and the ships on order. So what has been ordered this year is almost exclusively green fuels, meaning methanol in green and LNG in yellow. And if we go forward, we expect that on the larger ships, almost every order will be alternative fuels. Again, here you can see there's a split. The smaller ships, more conventional in the order book. The bigger ships, almost exclusively on new fuels. And again, I will skip this. You have it all in front of you because time is running out. I'll move to the next. So what are the propulsion choices by carrier? Here it's the same. MSC has been a very late adopter of new fuels, but now it's all in on LNG. Maersk has started on methanol. It's at methanol only, but recently chose LNG as a second option because it was running out of the supply of green methanol. And CMA CGM has been an early adopter of a dual fuel strategy. And I'm not going through all of them in detail, but you can see for yourself that there is no clear strategy. All the carriers have kind of a different approach on whether it's methanol or LNG. And one of the things we have to keep in mind, LNG gives you an out-of-the-box CO2 reduction. Methanol, on the other hand, only gives you an CO2 reduction when it's green methanol that has been sourced sustainably. And quite frankly, right now, why are carriers shifting back towards LNG? Because they see that there is not enough green methanol available in the market. Very, very quickly, what are the ship types that are driving the order book, which constitute the absolute majority of the ships on order? It's currently 5 vessel classes: the Megamax, the Neo-Panamax, the compact Neo-Panamax, and the new C8000. The ship type doesn't really have a name. It's ships in the compact class around 8,000 TEU. Here you can see how many ships are existing, how many are on order, and you can also see that on the order for the big ships, conventional is very, very low. It's all going green. For the smaller ships, still conventional ships are being ordered. I said 5 vessel types. Well, it's actually these 4, and a new class of vessel which is coming in, which is not as clearly defined, which will fill the gap between the largest ships, which are not really ordered anymore. There's a few still to be delivered, but that's where the action is. It's these ships which are currently driving the order book. And this is a slide for specialists who are interested in ship design. I'll not go into that because, again, I'm running out of time. But I'm happy to discuss this with you afterward. This is for the shipbuilding nerds. Summary is the ships are becoming shorter and wider. And the reason for that is that they are becoming slower. Because everything I said about new fuels, methanol, LNG, fair enough. But the most important thing is, irrespective what you power your ship with, get the overall consumption down and get it lower. And the easiest way to do that, there's all kinds of tricks you can do, but the easiest way is to just make your ship sail slower. And the Suez diversions, they have proven it, namely that the market will accept that. So in my last few seconds, what do we think is going to happen in 2025? It's really difficult to predict, but this is the crystal ball room after all, so we'll use the crystal ball, right? So rising energy cost will be the main driver. Like I said, build new ship designs, build slower ship designs, optimize your networks, sail slower. Energy cost in any form will be the main cost driver. Secondly, we don't predict the market to go back to the Red Sea very quickly. We believe that the carriers will maintain these Cape routings as long as possible, because frankly, between you and me, it is in their benefit because it avoids a situation of oversupply right now. And I also predict that once they can go back to the Suez, maybe in 2026, they will keep one of the weeks that they are currently sailing slower that they are taking longer, and they will use that to additionally steam slower, save more fuel, because they notice the market has kind of accepted these lead times. Thirdly, we believe that the market will turn to a latent overcapacity. Scrapping is expected to increase, but nevertheless, not as much as we think, because carriers will probably hold on to tonnage as long as this uncertainty goes on, because once you scrap a ship, you cannot get it back. If you don't scrap it, you can still have it, and if the market turns really bad, you can still scrap it. So carriers prefer to take it safe and not scrap too early. And fourthly and lastly, we have already seen that in parts, muted demand and a growing fleet capacity, no matter how much is taken out of the fleet from all these new buildings which are going to come, will put a notable downward pressure on freight rates. And that also means for many carriers, if the freight rates are going down, but their costs are going up, the party for many of the carriers is over. That's from me. Apologies for rushing it a little bit. And if you have any questions, there'll be a Q&A, but also come to me when I'm in the room, talk to me. And let me once again say that it is an honor and a pleasure to be invited here. I'm always happy to be here in Korea with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remark. 엑시스 마린 알팔라이너 수석 애널리스트 얀 타이드만 님께서 작년에 이어서 올해도 이렇게 Kobc 마리타임 컨퍼런스에서 소중한 말씀을 해주셨습니다. 너무 감사합니다. 사실 시간을 넉넉히 좀 드리고 저희가 듣고 싶은 이야기도 많고 또 이렇게 부탁드리고 싶은데 그러지를 못하는 점도 너무나 죄송합니다. 너무 감사합니다. 이어서 오늘의 마지막 연사를 모시도록 하겠습니다. 이번에는 글로벌 항만 동향과 전망을 주제로 준비를 해주셨는데요. 드루어리의 이코노미스트 한닝의 발표가 있겠습니다. 여러분 큰 박수로 맞아주시길 바랍니다. 발표를 들으시고 나서 우리 시간이 허락이 되면 질의응답 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a Chinese saying that the ones who stayed last will be the true love. So thanks everybody for still staying with us today till now. I'm the last speaker today. I think the organizer designed the agenda very well, where we have gone through the different bulk sectors and come to the container shipping. So whatever cargo they carry, everything will be carried or handled by the port. So my presentation today, we will go through the key fundamentals of the port investment sector. Okay, before we go to the details, something about my company. I'm working for Drewry. Drewry is a shipping and port consultant. So we also have the market research, publication segment, business unit, and we also have the advisory unit. I think from other speakers, they gone through some other very short-term market outlook that help us to understand what is for the next few months or for the next few years, what the market will be trending to. And Drewry is more on the medium-term or longer-term analysis. And personally, I'm from the advisory team. So basically, apart from the research, more of my job is dealing with the investors, bankers, and players who are expanding their services. They want to increase their fleet. They are acquiring or M&A with other small or bigger players. So basically, I'm involved in the more advisory project base. In the past few years, before the COVID, if my memory survives, and I've been working for HMM, for some Busan terminal projects, where I have been working for BNCT for Busan terminal as well. And Busan Port Authority and BIMI, also one is our good clients and one is our good friends. And BIMI opened the Shanghai office in Shanghai, and a few years ago, we have been meeting up with them in Shanghai. So yeah, this is my connection. Also in my family name carries a HAN. In Han Chinese, there's the same character with the Korea in the Chinese character. So I can feel the strong bond with Korea. Thank you. Yeah. And back into my working experience, basically all this my client, basically the bankers, investors, and very recently one famous shipping line, one Asia-based TS line got newly IPO, and we have been working for them on their IPO prospectus industry section overview for that. And recently, I think we are also approached by other investors. We can share something if it is not confidential. My presentation today, basically, before we go to some details, I will share our view about the market outlook. I think our previous speaker just mentioned the muted demand. Why the demand is muted and what's the implications to the investors. So for the first section, I will explain my interpretation about the market outlook for the next few years. And then, of course, I think KOBC is organizing this conference. Definitely before we make any financing or provide any money to the investors, definitely we need to assess how the market players doing, how is their performance, which region they are expanding into, who are the bad performers, and what's the reason behind this, and what's their different strategies, and what's the implications to us. So on the second and third section, I will go through and explain what is their different strategy and what's the implications to us. Okay, so first we go to the market outlook. I think one very common question being asked about the container traffic being handled by the port will be, is the global trade growth mature? It is the muted. So I can draw your attention to the different lines. The first line, the first top dark blue line, it is the world trade GDP ratio. You can see within the period between 1990 to 2006, during this period, the global GDP to trade to GDP ratio has been increasing dramatically from 38% to 60%. And if you look at the second line, it's the light blue line, that explains what's the main driver, that is China's trade contributing to the global GDP. You can see during this same period, China's trade to China's GDP ratio, you can see it increased from 22% to the 2006, year 2006, it is hiking up to the 65. You can see this specific year, it is a very special year, meaning to China, suddenly they realize that all their GDP relies on the external factors. They need to import the raw materials, and all their consumption demand comes or relies on the external factors. This is something not very safe factor for China. So since then, domestically, China is thinking to reduce the reliance on the global or external trade. This factor in China, we call about another word called boost the domestic consumption. And I think during the lunch, Ethan from Kobc also mentioned that some of their Korean players in China market, they have been facing or trying to diversify their existence, diversify their business from China to China plus one, or there's others. This is not only because the China's the trade to GDP ratio reduced, also because actually within China itself, the made in China has to some extent replacing the previous European and US and also Japan, Koreans production roles here. Yeah, so since then, I think due to these measures, so now back to the 2023, the last year, I think China managed to the GDP to trade to GDP ratio to 37%. And based on this phenomenon, you can see for the global, the dark blue, that's a global trade to GDP ratio. You can see the line is quite flat. That is why we are feeling that not only the dry bulk sector and liquid bulk and even container sector, everything comes to the 2%, between 2% to 4% ratio, growth ratio. This is now the fundamental reason behind this. Yeah, so coming to the future. And the graded area, this is our forecast. Roughly, I think this is the 5-year rolling growth rate. We can see that historically, back to the 1995 to before the 2010, this is the growth rate was very high. But looking forward, the graded area, our forecast, the global port handling TEU traffic will be somewhere at 3%. This is our forecast. Roughly, this forecast is based on the GDP and also trade forecast of all the main economies. Yeah, and previously we gone through the how is the global average. Then the next question is, we have many countries. So who are the best performers? Who are the bad performers? So on this page, this is based on the 2018 to 2023, the port TEU or port traffic CAGR. And this chart shows you who are growing better and who is declining. I think the worst performer, no surprise, is the Ukraine. You can see based on the volumes in the container boxes, their CAGR dropped 26.2%. This is the Ukraine. And something slightly better is the Russia, also declining 12.3. I think they are, because definitely this is a very transparent and crystal region why experiencing this. Definitely it is the impact of the war, and this is how the economy is suffering even until now. If I draw your attention to the Europe, I think back to this, definitely apart from this war, the impact from this war, there's definitely other reasons like the high interest rate and post-COVID different consumption behavior, something changed. So you can also see, down to the port operators' perspective, their total volume in the containers, you can see most of the Germany, Netherlands, UK, Spain all experienced the same downturn. And I think maybe look at the figures, it seems Germany and the UK experienced more than 3% decline. Yeah. And for our mature economy in Japan, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, they also experienced some 1% to 2% decline in the past 5 years. Some good news. Some good news is the green boxes. You can see China, not very high growth, still 4%. But given China's big scale, even 4%, meaning the 49.8, roughly 50 million TEUs, given this scale. And other increasing economies, including Turkey, 2.3%, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Morocco, Mexico, Brazil, India, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And if I can draw your attention to give you a very interesting chart here. This chart actually is from Bloomberg, so the credit goes to Bloomberg. They are assessing in the past few years between China and the US, they were on the, whatever we call it, is the tensions or trade war. So people will ask, who are the winner? Is it US or China? And who are the losers? China lost or US lost? The answer is the winner are others. So on this chart, the horizontal or x-axis, it is the changes in manufacturing export performance. So that the right hand means they are growing the manufacturing export activity growing faster. And the y-axis, it is the change in share of global greenfield investment. That means above the horizontal line, all the dots, all the countries, they attracted more greenfield investment. So the ones in the right-hand top are the ones, the winners. And the Bloomberg put some color to these countries. For the ones who they take either US side or China side, they can call it the connected countries or allied countries, and they put it under a black color. And they also identified a few countries that they don't take any side. They stay neutral, they stay independent. So they just take the chance to export their cargo and take all the China plus one, it is these countries. You can see these yellow dotted countries, including Mexico, Vietnam, Indonesia, Poland, and Morocco. So who are the winners? Not US, not China. These countries are the winners. What's the implications to us? I think for our port investment, our investors, before we putting our money in, before we make our capex investment, one key question is, what is the future of this economy? What's the future of the trade in the next few years? So these neutral economies, if we combine them together, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 countries, they have a very good global geographical location. And if we combine them together, they are roughly the similar size of Germany and also the similar size of Japan. And they only take the 4% of the global GDP, but they attracted 10% global greenfield FDIs globally. So if you go to Haiphong and if you go to Vietnam and as the other Indonesia, Mexico countries, you will see that a lot of the new FDIs pouring into their countries. And I can share with my one of my friends' experience. So he's a freight forwarder, one of the top freight forwarder in China. So people, their country, their company send them to all these different countries to catch up their chance to provide the logistic services to all the new cross-border e-business. Even some of the countries like Mexico, which is not very secure, but they still worthwhile to take this risk to expand their business to there. Even one of my friends was almost killed by the local gangsters, but the company still sent another team to take over. That is the real experience. So you can see, you can feel that even within the country itself, within China, everybody is very pessimistic about the economy itself. But what they are doing, expanding, is to go overseas to see any other new opportunities in these new countries. In these countries, I think for other investors, for the East Europe, Poland, and also Hungary and other East Europe countries, another destination that will attract more FDI. Even after this Ukraine war, after the Middle East tensions, you can imagine in the Middle East and in the East Europe will be still a very good location to attract all the production. Not replacing, to some extent, replacing China. That will be one of the China plus one or China plus many. This is one of the many countries. Yeah. So you may ask which region will see higher growth. So the answer is on the dots on the right hand axis. You can see roughly most of the regions their port throughput CAGR in the next 5 years falls under or between 2% to 4%. Between 2% to 4%. So 3% is the global average. So if Busan ports sees some or they are making some budget for the next few years, somewhere between this range is sensible for them. And another question is, you may ask, which region will see more higher growth? I think our answer is the US, the North America, and also Oceania. And for the Middle East and South Asia, will be also see relatively higher growth. But why Asia, the growth is relatively lower? Because in Asia, we have the very biggest ports, and any extra growth, it is not that easy. So in terms of the very high base, so Asia's 2% is not very bad. And next question, so where to put your money to? So which region will attract more investment? Here's the answer. You can see also the dots. And right-hand axis is the growth rate for the next 5 years, how the capacity expansion for the next 5 years. You can see all the most of the highest growth comes to the Middle East and the South Asia. And within this region, the key driver is India. We are seeing that India is taking their shape and trying to attract more and more investors. And they are, because due to their cargo inbound, outbound, they require more port investment to improve their port infrastructure. So their local port operators and other operators in Dubai and in the Middle East, they are also seeing in South Asia attracting more and more investors. So we will go through some of the key players later. And in Asia, we will also see that roughly 72 million TEUs terminal capacity in Asia, and most of the projects in Singapore defending their Southeast Asia transshipment hub, and Singapore is building the very mega port to us. There's extra capacity comes to Singapore. Apart from Singapore, we will see that Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, these countries, they have their own plan and to expand their capacity to catch up with their expansion. Yeah. So the next 10 minutes, we will have a look at how the key players, what is their key players' perspective. We show this comparison about the market share of different types of the port operators. The big change or big game changer is that the light blue, that is a global hybrid. That is the market, or that is the port operators of the shipping line background, terminal operators. That is why in Busan, I think Busan Port Authority is very wise. Busan has attracted a lot of the shipping line background players or investors in Busan. And actually, it is the same in other regions. CMA CGM, Costco Shipping was one of the biggest investors in the past 10 years. They are trying to secure their more stable assets, especially in some key regions, key emerging regions as well. And our new player is Haploid. After some new business, and I think they have transformed and changed the idea from purely shipping line background player to they are also thinking to invest in some port business, Haploid. Yes, and this is the one page that you can see based on all the key players, what is their strategies, what they are going to do for the next few years. Are they building more organic extension or expansion, or they are trying to acquiring more greenfield projects? I think you can see on the right hand, you can see that most of the port operators, they are more conservative. In the next 5 years, most of their capacity expansion will still be on the organic growth. And only a few players, that is the brown colored ones, that is the ones that will come to some new greenfield, i.e. they are building a more greenfield projects to try to attract more traffic to these new projects. Definitely, you may want to ask why they are taking different strategies. If I can summarize why these companies taking the different strategy, we can Drewry identified 5 kinds of growth strategy for all these players. One is the pure terminal operators, like the traditional HPH, PSA, China merchants. Some of them, they are still the transshipment focused, like the PSA. Some of them, they are the gateway port or gateway traffic focused. That is the gateway traffic. And some of others, like the CMA, APMT, MSC, Costco, Haploid. These are the shipping line background ones. Most of them, they are still thinking to acquire some key assets in the what we call the transit key node of the supply chain, and they are still maybe from their shipping lines business doing very good in the past few years, and they want to use the money to invest into other key assets to make their supply chain more manageable and stable. Some of our other ICTSI, Adani, and other EU ports. This you can see. ICTSI, this is focused on the, basically they focus on the key gateway port, but their size of the market or size of the project is relatively very small. So this kind of the small players, they are also, ICTSI's background is not government owned or government managed, they are family owned, so they are the risk takers. They are willing to take the risk to go to the more emerging, higher risk, higher tariff regions. This is the ICTSI's strategy. If I can draw your attention, I would like to highlight in the global arena, there are 2 players. One is the AD ports. One is the AD ports. One is the Khalifa. Actually, that is based in all the Middle East background, and one is the DP World. Actually, DP World has been expanding in the past few years, and AD ports, they are the new emerging. They are very aggressive. They have their own home port free trade zones. So the free trade zones are the cash cow of these companies. These companies' cash cow deep pocket. So they want to. The national strategy of these Middle East countries, they want to diversify their strategy from relying purely on the oil energy industry to other industries, and the transportation is one key industry they want to expand into. This is not only making a great money, but also they want to influence and exert more management power on the global supply chain. So you can see the 80 ports, they had made a very grand plan. So in the next few years, they will invest in quite a lot of these shipping line backgrounds, also other logistic background players, including some data company, feeder company, and other logistic provider companies, including some IT platforms. So I think for these new players emerging from the Middle East, they will use this chance. They are the new players in this global market. They will use this chance to exert more influence. They are the comers, and they don't mind to take some risk. They are looking at India. They are looking at Southeast Asia, and in a wider global platform. So before we put our money in, I think including KOBC and other bankers, basically before they provide money or financing to the project, some of the questions they may be thinking about. One is the question is, you may ask your client, what is your strength? For the local shipping or local port authority, when they assess or when they attract some players, why they choose you? What's your strength? You cannot say, I can provide you money. They don't need it. They need money, but money is not their first priority. So for the landlord perspective, their first priority is volume or traffic. So whatever or whoever want to join us or become our concessionaire, so who can you bring in to their port? This is one of their first problem or first question they may ask you. So for the other new entrants, before we put money in, provide our financing to them, so some of our question, either duty or know our customer, will be their project or their strategy focusing on greenfield projects, or they want to done a very massive M&A. They are focusing on the container terminal projects, or it is a multi-purpose also doable for them. Do not forget that, because now very limited projects available in the world globally. So all the investors, they have the money, they want to invest, so they don't mind put their money into the multi-purpose. So multi-purpose is another area that everybody is striving for. Also in the landlord, they have different choices as well, either offering one single asset to attract their investors, or they want to offer a portfolio so that you can enter into that portfolio to have a more wider shareholding structure in that wider portfolio. And we are doing a financial investor or operating investor. This is another question when we assess that investment. So yeah, apart from this, I think all the other speakers also mentioned that definitely because the world economy, the growth this is still growing, but the economy growth comes to a more plateau, flat period. So then in the next few years, and depends on the region by region, we may experience some risk and volatility. So are you ready to put your money in this asset? Yeah, we need to review this different region by region, asset by asset. Yeah, this is my presentation today, and thanks everybody for staying over, and I hope my presentation is helpful. And if for any other question that we can discuss offline, and I thanks again for KOBC's invitation, and wish KOBC conference a great success. Thank you.
Thank you. 네, 글로벌 항만 동향과 전망을 주제로 또 의미 있는 마지막 말씀도 주셨고요. 드루리 이코노미스트 한닝의 발표가 끝이 났습니다. 이렇게 오늘 금융 세션부터 해운 항만 세션 첫 번째, 두 번째 세션까지 모든 저희가 준비한 프로그램이 끝이 났습니다. 소중한 말씀을 주신 우리 연사분들께 다시 한번 큰 박수 보내주시겠습니까? 네. 함께 해주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 이렇게 좋은 이야기들 또 전망 동향 말씀을 주셨고요. 혹시 플로어에서 질의응답을 좀 이어가려고 합니다. 궁금하신 사항들이 있으시면 저희 스태프들이 마이크를 좀 전달드리겠습니다. 좀 손을 들어주시면 저희가 마이크를 전달드려서 우리 지금 자리하신 연사께 답변을 받을 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 네, 오늘 정말 우리 전문가 여러분들, 관계자 여러분들 많이 자리하셨는데요. 네, 마이크를 네. 어떤 분께 질문을 주실지 또 말씀을 좀 먼저 주십시오. 네, 말씀을 네. 잠시만 기다려 주십시오.
Good to see you again, Jan. Okay, another question since last year. I'm Stephen from Unique Logistics. Well, welcome again. But I would like to ask you about possible China effect for the coming years. That maybe we can say that during the past, something like 2 decades, all those in the shipping market grow based on China effect. But however, how do you see in the coming years? Because we can see that in the first half of this year, China effect really showed that the market really strongly grows. And second half of this year, rather weak. However, we see again some increase for the 3 consequent weeks. It is based on those in China, right? So how do you see in the next year? And another thing is, who has stronger power in the market? We can say that in the first half of this year, it is carrier side. And second half of this year, we can say that maybe not the really carrier side. However, we can see some kind of rate increase, not only because of the China's volume, however, also their blank sailings.
These are 2 challenging questions. I'm not sure I can answer them adequately, I have to say, I'm sorry. However, I'll try to find my way out of it and put the responsibility for the answer somewhere else. So I'm going out a lot and meeting at relatively high level people in shipping companies, management level, who are asking themselves the same question. And especially on China, what I see is that the mood is cautiously optimistic simply because the country is so huge, the economy is so huge, that even a very moderate growth in China will have a notable effect. And one of the things on the more general scale, we have traditionally always talked about the GDP multiplier. 1% of GDP growth is 2% of shipping growth, is 4% of liner shipping growth. And we all know that this is kind of dead now. 1% of GDP growth maybe gives you 1% of liner growth. There's no multiplier in between, or you might say that the multiplier is 1. However, if you look at how the market has grown, like I showed over the last 20 years, to 6 times what it used to be 20 years ago, if you look at where we are right now, even a very moderate growth of 1.5%, for example, that is still a considerable growth in absolute terms, in TEUs handled, in vessel capacity. And so the people I had the fortune of talking to directly on CEO level and CFO level in shipping companies in the last half year, they are about China, question mark. But in their long-term strategies, they very strongly believe in other economies which are emerging. Everybody's talking about India. It's not a coincidence that Hapag-Lloyd, who has been kind of asleep on the terminal front, where we just heard about the ports and the terminals, has recently invested in India, was acquiring a large stake in JM Baxi, making India a priority. That a rise of like 10, 20, 30% of Indians into the middle class will create growth. West Africa is the same, the port infrastructure is there. So that's kind of where growth comes from, but I'm not sure I can give you an answer on pointing it on the China effect. And give me a keyword. What was the other thing? I forgot.
The other question is about who has stronger market power.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, as you can see, in the long run, it has always been the customer, because the carriers, the transportation of a container has been absolutely price sensitive. You know, every promise you have made over the last 10 years, better service, better reliability, higher speed, if you could get it, people would happily take it, but it was never rewarded in the market by giving you 1 or 2 euros more on the rate. And then we went through all these effects that I don't have to describe again. You all know, post-COVID, ships being queued up, ports on strike, ports closed, and the freight rates went through the roof. And that was obviously clearly a market in the carrier's favor. So yeah, where are we going back to right now? Short term, we are a little bit in the carrier's favor, but all signs are that this is going to turn again. And we're going back to maybe the situation we had in the 10 years before that, where it is at the end the BCO, the cargo owner, who makes the decision mainly based on the rate. And the only thing that I might say is I don't think that we will go back to a market which is 100% price driven, as it was for decades. We might go back on the container to a market which is mainly price driven, but some of the cargo owners, some of the forwarders have learned the hard way, they have learned during Corona, that certain things like reliability, etc., are worth a little bit of money. And if you have a commodity which is worth like $1, you cannot have a freight rate because it's a low value commodity, which is more expensive than the commodity at some point. It doesn't make sense. But we have seen strategically that even small, simple commodities have stopped production chains. Like we had, imagine you have a container of spark plugs and it's not arriving at your BMW factory and you cannot deliver 1,000 BMW 7 Series worth millions because the spark plugs are missing. And that's a very extreme example, but I think that at some of the cargo owners and forwarders, maybe they are going to reward quality a little bit more so that we're coming to an increased rate level with enforceable quality standards. That's one of the things that I mentioned earlier, Gemini is trying to promise. That's why they are doing all this new setup. I said they're not only a new alliance, but an alliance of a new kind. They are making this promise on reliability, punctuality, but they still have to deliver on that. That's a whole different story. So I believe in 2025, the power will slowly shift a little bit back to the cargo owners. But depending on how tight capacity is being managed, the carriers are trying to put that moment as far back in the future as they can.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much.
네, 땡큐. 다른 질문도 없으실까요? 저희가 한 2분 정도 질문을 더 받을 수 있을 것 같습니다. 네, 마이크를 전달드립니다. 고맙습니다. 네.
Hello, I'm Sungu from Busan Finance Center. My question also goes to Jan, who has been addressing the alliances in the maritime industry. So you've addressed the different strategic alliances formed by different players in the shipping industry, and MSC and Maersk, the breakup of the two has been quite recent news. And it seems that the bigger player doesn't. It seems that the bigger player doesn't seem to want to make alliances with other firms, whereas small firms maybe seems more likely to make alliances with other firms as well. So, for instance, HMM and Yang Ming's and other firms have, as you addressed, have made alliances. So, my question is, from your perspective, it is an optimal strategy for HMM to form an alliances and strengthen those alliances with other firms and continue to make significant shipping capacity to those alliances, because I'm seeing that the Maersk and MSC, those two players, doesn't seem to put much shipping capacities to the alliances. So, thank you.
So the short answer would be yes, absolutely. I think for a shipping line like HMM, which is one of the big ones, but in the big one, more a medium-sized one, it's absolutely crucial to be part of an alliance. However, that's not limited to HMM. Actually, if you look at the scale that carriers have, I would think that only MSC is the one which is actually big enough to stand alone. Initially, when Hapag-Lloyd announced they would leave the alliance, and when MSC and Maersk announced that they would quit, everybody expected Hapag-Lloyd to join some other alliance, but most expected that MSC would go alone, not only because they are so big, but also because it's in their DNA. It's how they always like to operate, and they are happiest if they can have the flexibility of making very quick decisions. They are not stock registered. They are just a family which can come together and decide, we're doing it, and they do it tomorrow. So for MSC, it was clear, I think, that they would not end up in a new alliance. Maersk said the same. They said, no, we're not looking for any new setup. But even Maersk, which is the second biggest carrier in the world, is not big enough to offer a complete standalone network on East-West on their own. I think even the biggest carriers struggle to do that because it's a very, very capital intensive industry. You need to offer at least 5 Asia-Europe strings, and maybe the same on the Pacific. That's 10 strings, 10 ships per string, so we're talking about 100 ships already. That's a huge task, and I don't believe that outside of MSC and Maersk, anybody could do that. Not even number 3 or number 4 would have the scale to do that. You could, of course, say theoretically they could, because if we see they only put 50% of their capacity in an alliance, why not put all their capacity into these trades, and then they would be big enough to do it alone. But it doesn't work because, of course, for the alliances are limited on the big East-West trades, where you need specific tonnage. You cannot put, if your fleet has 5 million TEU, but 2 million TEU of that will be ships which are not suited for these trades. They are regional ships, small ships, feeders, ships which are too slow, too fast, too thirsty, which are not built for this, which are high reefer, more for South America. So the short answer is, I believe for everybody, but the biggest, it's not possible. And also, there is no reason to do it. If you're running an established alliance and it's working, there is no upside for you to being outside. From a carrier perspective, with the exception of MSC, which is just different, I don't see why you would want to be outside an alliance. For some, I can understand that they are not happy in their setup and they would prefer to be in a different alliance or with different partners. Or maybe most of them would like to have just one partner instead of 4, because you have to discuss everything 4 times, you have to travel, you have to have meetings. It's more complicated organizing a group of 4 or 5 than organizing a group of 2. But I think the medium-sized carriers, if they want to be active in the East-West trades, they have to be in an alliance for the foreseeable future. And then the big question mark is, maybe one day in the future, the regulatory authorities will say something about alliances, or will say it's no longer allowed, or put more scrutiny on that. But that I don't know. It could happen, and then the cards are being changed, are shuffled again.
네, 답변이 되셨을까요? 네, 고맙습니다. 네, 답변도 감사드리고요. 한 분께만 더 질문을 좀 받을까요? 뒤쪽에 계신 분들 가운데는 혹시 질문 주실 참가자 안 계실까요? 오랫동안 또 자리하셨는데 궁금하신 거나 혹시나 아니면 저희 KOBC에 하시고 싶은 말씀이라든지 네, 의견도 좋습니다. 네, 안 계실까요? 괜찮으시겠습니까? 네, 고맙습니다. 제가 사회자가 이 조명 때문에 혹시 손을 들었는데 드셨는데 혹시 발견을 못한 건 아니죠? 네, 고맙습니다. 현재 시각이 딱 17시 30분, 5시 30분인데 시간을 딱 맞춰서 우리 말씀도 주시고 이렇게 질의응답도 함께 나눠봤습니다. 본 부산해양금융위크 1일차 함께했습니다. 2024 KOBC 마리타임 컨퍼런스 함께 나눴고요. 벌써 2018년 시작을 해서 이 마리타임 컨퍼런스는 제 7회차 함께하고 있습니다. 쭉 저희가 로비에도 지난 역사들 함께 해오셨던 이 과정들을 전시를 해두었는데요. 앞으로도 여정에 우리 참가자 여러분들께서 우리 관계자 여러분들께서 함께 해주시기를 부탁드리고요. 더 내실 있는 주제와 그리고 해운 항만 물류 산업의 성장과 발전을 위한 논의의 장으로 더욱더 본 컨퍼런스가 발전해 나가고 성장해 나가도록 하겠습니다. 앞으로도 쭉 함께 해주시고요. 또 내일 2일차 때 인사드리도록 하겠습니다. 끝으로 설문조사서와 함께 이 한국해양진흥공사 KOBC 유튜브 채널 혹시 아직 구독 안 하셨다면 구독 그리고 카카오톡 친구 채널 추가를 하시고 등록 데스크에 보여주시면 소정의 기념품을 준비하셨다고 합니다. 건강에 도움이 되는 비타민으로 알고 있는데요. 여러분 소정의 기념품도 인증해 주시고 함께 수령해 가시면 너무 좋을 것 같습니다. 관계기관을 대신해서 오늘 이렇게 1일차 프로그램 공식 개회식부터 장시간 함께해 주신 모든 전문가 여러분들, 관계자 여러분들께 다시 한번 진심으로 감사드립니다. 사용하셨던 통역 수신기는 테이블에 놓고 그냥 이동해 주시면 저희가 따로 수고하도록 하겠습니다. 장시간 함께해 주셔서 진심으로 감사드립니다. 안녕히 돌아가십시오. 고맙습니다.